New York just spent $10 million retraining teachers in the science of reading. But according to some major literacy experts, the training may have taught balanced literacy anyways. And this wasn't a small pilot project. This was Governor Kathy Hochul's massive Back to Basics literacy initiative. This was designed to retrain 20,000 teachers after years of criticism that schools were relying on outdated reading methods. But after researchers reviewed the course materials, some started asking a pretty uncomfortable question. If the training itself still included the very practices the state was supposedly moving away from, did anything actually change? Over the last few years, we've heard the same story over and over again. States pass laws, districts announce reforms, teachers get retrained, and everyone assumes the problem is solved. But this story out of New York reveals something much bigger. Changing policy is one thing, changing classroom practice is another. Because on paper, New York looked like a leader in literacy reform. In 2024, the state launched a massive science of reading initiative that included a 30-hour teacher training course developed by New York State United Teachers. But once researchers started reviewing the actual training materials, things got messy. Some of the strongest criticism came from Mark Steinberg and Timothy Shanahan. These are not fringe voices in literacy research. And according to reports, both argued the training still reflected balanced literacy thinking in key areas. Then, literacy researcher Susan Newman reportedly responded, "We've spent $10 million on this. Can I get a refund?" That quote spread quickly because it captured the entire controversy. The state believed it was funding science of reading reform. Critics believed many of the old instructional habits were still embedded underneath. One of the most talked about examples involved phoneme pronunciation. Critics documented instructors pronouncing sounds like m instead of And if you're not in literacy spaces online, that may sound tiny, but in early reading instruction, tiny things matter. Supporters of explicit phonics instruction argue that children need clean, accurate sounds to properly connect speech to print. So critics didn't see this as a harmless mistake. They saw it as evidence that many trainers themselves may not have fully shifted instructional approaches. And that debate quickly became symbolic of something larger. Had the philosophy actually changed, or had the language simply changed? And the next criticism made the tension even bigger. Reviewers found that the training reportedly still included running records. This is an assessment practice strongly associated with balanced literacy and cueing-based instruction. Critics argue running records encourage teachers to focus on pictures, context clues, and prediction strategies instead of accurate decoding. And that's what made this so controversial, because New York's own initiative was supposed to move schools away from those practices. To many researchers, this became a perfect example of what's often called the implementation gap. The policies change, the messaging changes, but classroom habits stay surprisingly similar underneath. And honestly, this is why reading reform has become so confusing for parents and teachers. Because changing a law is much easier than changing deeply embedded classroom practices. And if you've noticed your school talking about the science of reading while instruction still feels very similar, you are definitely not the only one. And this story matters far beyond New York. Because as of 2025, more than 1 in 5 New York districts were still using non-evidence-based reading curricula. Educational change moves slowly. Teachers were trained under older systems. Districts already invested millions in existing programs. Universities still prepare many educators using balanced literacy frameworks. And that means reform often becomes messy and incomplete, which is why the science of reading debate is no longer just about phonics. It's about whether large educational systems can actually change once instructional habits become deeply embedded. And I think that's the real takeaway from this entire controversy. New York didn't ignore literacy reform. They invested heavily in it. They changed policies, they retrained teachers, they launched statewide initiatives. But critics argue that many of the old ideas may still be woven into the system itself. And that's why this debate keeps escalating nationally. Because we're no longer just arguing about reading research. We're arguing about whether educational systems can truly change once certain teaching practices become deeply ingrained. And if you want to understand why this debate over reading instruction became so explosive in the first place, watch my video on the 3Qing controversy next.